So my name is Olena. I work at Confluent, and in my daily work I deal with a lot of data, a lot of streaming data. But this presentation is a bit less serious. It's not about banking details, financial transactions, or medical records. We are going to talk about something a bit lighter. I wanted to combine streaming data with a bit of AI, and also one of my favorite games. Actually, by the number of hours I played it, it's by far my favorite game. Any one of you played Stardew Valley by any chance? Oh, we do have some hands. Amazing. So, yes, those of you who didn't play, good for you. You saved hours and hours and days and months. In my case, I calculated if I wouldn't sleep, it would be 3 months playing the game. So, don't start. Today we are going to take that game and we are going to take the characters out of context. Then we are going to put them on the village square, add AI and make them talk to each other and also kind of spread some information between each other. And for this, we are going to use a couple of technologies. One of those will be Apache Kafka. Then we are going to use Apache Flink. We are going to use some AI, so here I selected OpenAI just for the sake of it. And we are going also to use RAG and vector search. I used OpenSearch for this presentation. But before we dive into playful part of it, I wanted just to look at some of the papers, and actually it has been for quite a while which I was observing the agents and usage of agents with LLMs. And when recently I looked at the fresh data and like what kind of new papers we have, I found a GitHub repository, and it was like all the resources here on the latest papers, and I was like super happy. Okay, I will take just the latest part of it. Then I googled more, I found another GitHub repository with more papers. So the amount of research which is happening is enormous. And we are not going, don't worry, I'm not going to cover all those papers. I just wanted actually to mention a couple of those, as it was started for at least my interest in the space a couple of years ago. And the paper which I looked at was called Generative Agents, Interactive Simulacra of Human Behavior. I still don't know the whole meaning of those words, but I saw this demo where creators of the paper, and it was like Standford University together with Google, they actually created a village with different characters who had some kind of knowledge about each other to some extent, and they have their like spaces, buildings on the map, and they interact between each other. And the idea is to prove that, not to prove, but to see if they can imitate live creatures and they can kind of remain consistent to their beliefs. There is way more to that, and there is an amazing repository, and all the links I'm showing I will share with you at the end in my GitHub repository, to all the links to the papers I'm going to mention, as well as to the code which I created. But this particular repository written in Python, amazing one, I was thinking that the code is messy, but then when I wrote my code, I can't really complain about messiness of this one. So the paper itself goes into the details more or less, and it was published 2023, so it's around 2 years ago. And I think that actually they put quite a lot of innovative parts which we see emerging after that again and again in different other papers, in the way how they treat the memory, how they do their thinking processing. So it's quite interesting. And just to give kind of an idea of what is happening, so their village had all like different places where those villagers lived, but also they had like pharmacy, store, parks, cafes. Some villagers knew each other, others didn't, and then they actually met and introduced during this simulation, and they simulated it for 1 day. Each of the characters had a schedule. For the routine which they were taking, and we knew like where they should be like in the morning and during the day. However, they could change those plans as they were moving on, depending on what is happening in their daily activities. And the whole at that point of time idea which the paper was bringing through is condensed in this image. They were working with the memory, and as a central part was a memory stream of what is happening to the character, to the villager, when it was interacting with other people or doing some activities, because also in the village, like in the room, there was like a book that character could read a book or, I don't know, observe something. And then that memory stream was full of a lot of different activities which might be relevant but might not be relevant to what is happening at the moment for that villager. So we retrieve only what is relevant, and then the process of interaction with the world happens like we perceive the world, we reflect, we plan, and we act. So those things are combined all together to make something meaningful in the moment. So this is like, okay, that's not visible, but it's more or less like memory stream of one of the characters. For example, Isabella Rodriguez is reading a book, Beth is idle, so objects which they can interact. And those memories have different relevance for that moment. And this is a slide from the presentation by June Park, who one of the creators, main creator, I guess, of this old demo. So they were thinking which of the past activities, of the past memories are more relevant than others. And they created this formula based on the recency, importance, and relevance. And it's kind of, in a way, simple, but then when I'm reading like latest research on the memory for LLM, I'm running into kind of similar ideas. So I think they still introduced it pretty early in the stage. And the link to his presentation I will also share with you later. So this was actually, they developed the game when the GPT was still like the GPT-1, second, and then third. And then we had a problem with context window. So they couldn't actually, their kind of additional motivation was that they couldn't put all the memories of the villagers, like they're going through the day, they have those 24 hours for some activities. They couldn't put that whole memory and conversations with other villagers into the context window for GPT 3.5 because it was like later that they used, because it was still limited. So they had to be quite creative also to condense it. Nowadays, our context windows for LLMs are significantly bigger, so that we don't really worry for those size limitations. However, again, for the large language model, to make kind of a bit more narrow, you don't want to give too much information. And also to imitate maybe a human being, also you want to kind of condense in the memories which stay in our head after we have the conversations. We don't really remember everything like word by word. So anyway, so this is kind of the memory stream. Then they also introduced observations and reflections. So observations is like the basis of what those villagers like going through their rooms, like waking up, or like library table is being used to discuss research material. This is for the Klaus Müller. And he made a lot of those observations. And then he reflects on that. So those things which are happening during the day, those villagers from time to time, they enter this reflection mode where they think, okay, this was like happening. What I'm making out of it. And then kind of like they go level up, and like at the top level, for example, for the Klaus Müller, he perceives himself as a highly dedicated to research. So it creates their identity based on what they observe, what they're doing, and so on. So this is again also quite interesting how we right now at the start, when we were using GPT, for example, the text was generating immediate response. Right now, we see that actually it has several cycles of considering information, analyzing and iterating on that. This is kind of like example, but turned into those small agents, villagers in our village. Then another thing which in that paper they try to do, they're like, okay, so those villagers don't have a lot of information. So initially they start with a bit of like description of their identity and some schedule, and more or less like as a student or it's a retired person and so on. And then they were making their life based on that observation. But they wanted also to see, what if they will bring idea to one of the villagers, and if that one villager will be able to spread that idea to everyone else and organize something. And here they selected Isabella, who is planning some party at Hope's Cafe. It's actually like it was Valentine's Day, but in the game it's actually July, I don't know, but whatever. So, and then her idea was to organize a party in some particular place, and then by the end of that simulation, for 24 hours, she convinced other villagers to bring like balloons, to invite other people, and it was not her who actually invited everyone, but she spread the word, and then people were coming because they heard from someone else. There were a couple of people who she didn't manage to reach, or like a couple of people who didn't hear about the whole thing, but generally, like still, it was a success. So this project was, for me, quite interesting, especially 2 years ago. That was not only like a research paper, which was quite well written, and you know, not all research papers are doing quite well, but also it was a great demo. Like many of those demos, to be honest, it's a bit sad because I tried to run it recently and I couldn't. And I think it's like a lot of outdated dependencies and a lot of problems right now. So, but still, if you know Python code and interested, you can check it out. Also quite interesting how they wrote the prompts and all those things at that point of time. Again, like the field evolves, but still some really good ideas. And since they created the concept of memory, reflection, chain of thought, so I still consider this is like an excellent start for that agentic systems which we have. And over the time, I experimented based on this idea. For example, I created a Mafia game. Here, just for short simplicity, there are 3 people playing Mafia game. And they have like the talking stages and then reflection stages to try to figure out who is Mafia. What I quickly learned at that point of time, so the character who starts the game usually wins the game. Also, in the way how LLM is created, it's quite eager to please and agree with others. So yeah, that's like a side effect for that stuff. Then my colleague at that point of time, Sebastian Blanc, he created an idea of having a Hippola planet where there are a couple of people, how do you call it, like some creatures who live on that planet and they talk to each other. They also have their kind of Twitter, and they generate that messages and come to some conclusions. Based on that idea, I also looked how we can actually to take 2 agents, and we can work also with the memory, so introduce the conversation between the agents using the PubSub, Kafka. Then at the end of the conversation, we summarize it using, again, LLM model, store it, and then later we process it, and we put it into a vector store. So in the vector store, and just to get me a bit of understanding, how many of you worked with vector search? Okay, so we have some. So vector store can help us to search for entities in it, but it doesn't really work like word by word. Instead, it actually converts text or image or whatever into numbers. And then it is possible to find some, based on the knowledge of the embedding model, which does this conversion. We can find, for example, if I'm talking like late evening, like, I don't know, a breeze of the wind, and then we have a sunset word. Those can be connected. So depending again on the knowledge of the model and how it was trained to connect different words to each other, like phrases. So it will not be searching for exact instances, but instead it will use multidimensional those vectors to try to connect entities. So in that way, we could store the memories of, in that case, I had again 2 aliens, because apparently once you add some mention of a planet Hippola, those agents really like to talk about flowers and plan their discoveries. It's like kind of a bit of a weird LLM thing. So those aliens were able to talk to each other, and then at the end I could summarize that knowledge, and then I vectorize it into some persistent memory. And later when I do again the conversation, and again they retrieve those memories, and they use those memories to continue the conversation. So that was another experiment which I did, and some other ones. And I've been working with Kafka, vector store, with Flink. So I was trying to use all those technologies. Then there was another research which I found quite interesting by the same, more or less the same group of people. So June Park, who created the previous village of people, now they did a research. They took a group of human participants. They made some interviews to our interviews, and they created agents on behalf of those human participants. So they kind of use the knowledge during those questions to train agents. And then later they interviewed on some different set of questions humans and those agents, and they compared and kind of showed that the answer generated by simulated agents are very close to what humans would be saying, which is a bit creepy. But it's interesting research again. I will link to that. So yes, then there was research on Tiny Troop. That's where they try to simulate people with specific personalities, interests, goals. They create a tiny world, a tiny person, and it was for productivity or business scenarios. For example, you have a group of people, you generate those agents, kind of imitating people, and they should come up with an idea how to create an advertisement for something. And it was also like, this was maybe like half a year ago, and they used the same approach. So there was, during the conversation, there were also parts of reflection. So here, yeah, so think. So parts where those agents were from time to time going and considering and analyzing and evaluating what they were doing. Some other interesting research worth mentioning. This is actually from May, so it's very recent. So this is about AI memory, how it is represented, how it changed over the time, and also how we test it, so, and where research is heading. So this is kind of also that we have long-term memory, short-term memory, how we actually kind of play with it, and how we forget also, like, I think it is with also the models, how we had it in the past for LSTM, for example, model that over the time we need to forget some stuff. So all those things, maybe the last paper to mention, this is on the reasoning models, which we use right now, I think, quite frequently. So whenever you are right now, if you are using not only ChatGPT, but ChatGPT included, all those reasoning models where it first will try to talk to itself, understanding what user wants, iterate, make some different requests. This is also quite interesting because this is this thinking phase which was tried to be added like in all those libraries before. But right now we have this chain of thought, which is not just additional feature for the model, but it's like a core of the model. And it will be like not working efficiently without it. So, but saying all that, this is a lot of serious stuff, and like, again, I will share the links to the research with latest LLM and agents things. So you can look deeper into that if you're interested. But I wanted to do something like fun. And I'm quite sure also like some of the libraries, like Tiny Troop, it was quite impressive, but I also feel it's very difficult to keep up. So the field evolves so fast that sometimes we don't even stay in the moment and enjoy what we have. But the field is moving like, and it's like, okay, new stuff appears. So a lot of libraries got kind of dropped, which is a bit sad. So yeah, so kind of taking a moment and doing something experimental. And this is based, so I took, at first I was thinking how I will create my small world. But then I thought that if I will start creating the small world, I will spend more time creating the story. So I decided I will go for Stardew Valley. Because yeah, I also know those characters pretty well, but also there is a good wiki where I could grab the information about those characters and use that information. For example, this is about Louis. He's a mayor in the Pelican town. And then there is some information about him. So, and based on that information, I can later create the conversations. I also edited first like some quotes, some laughs, everything which I could get from the wiki of the game. But then actually I kind of dropped it because it was a bit too much and I needed some kind of a more guided conversation. Then also for my visualization was pretty cool that there are like those stripes, I think it's called. So anyways, those like images which I can use to put villagers on the map. So I took the villager information, I created a small world, and what I did, I created a game loop which was kind of on every animation frame, I could trigger a movement of the villager. So that's how it started. Like we can move them, that's not super complex if you do it on every animation frame in JavaScript. I was quite happy about it. I had to draw the boxes around the buildings so that people, like my villagers, cannot cross there. It's not exactly super, I didn't spend so much time on that particular one. And in the end, actually, I have a lot of like trees where the villagers are crossing. So it's a bit chaotic, but works kind of okay-ish. So that information is sent to the villager about the movement. And then I needed to come up to the point where when the villagers are close to each other, there is a conversation starting. So for that, there is a flow of information. So all the locations for the villagers, I actually share to a topic in Apache Kafka. And I send that information so that I have some kind of a database which has a stream of data of where in each given moment my villagers are. Here a bit of like side note, I try to do it a bit even more differently. I try to generate the locations of the villagers outside of my application, send it to Apache Kafka topic, and then consume the data and to prove my villagers on the map. But that, because it doesn't happen on that kind of millisecond range, it didn't look super smooth, so I decided I will cheat a bit the system. I will just send the data from the client to Apache Kafka on the location of the villagers. In that way, my demos and everything, like movement, looks very organic and very smooth. So yeah, so data goes to Apache Kafka. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Apache Kafka. Could you raise your hand? Oh wow, okay. That's majority of the room, but if you are not familiar with Apache Kafka, it's kind of a platform which helps us navigate the data across microservices or your systems, and it's made to work very, very fast. So it's kind of a system which adjusts to the amount of data which you have. So if you can think about like water going as a data, and Kafka is kind of like a pipe which can make it bigger or smaller depending on the need and amount of water you have to go through the system. And we usually think in terms of topics. So it's like, it's not exactly a table because the data is immutable and everything is kind of done to have a really low latency and high throughput. So it's kind of done for the performance. So anyway, so this is Apache Kafka. And we send the data there about the locations, and then I can get the information on the, like continuously on where each of the villagers is, what are the coordinates, and the timestamp, so that I can replace the data if needed. And then next, I had to calculate how close those villagers are to each other. So with my topic, which had that information on the villagers, I send it to Apache Flink to process the data. And Apache Flink takes a window of information and will be able to calculate the proximity of the villagers and define if they're close enough. Couple of words about Apache Flink, and maybe if I can ask, do you know Apache Flink? Anyone? Okay, we have maybe 4 hands. Great, so Apache Flink is a kind of, I would say, it's sitting at the heart of real-time data platform, and it can kind of ingest unbounded data, so like those streams of data, for example, the locations of the villagers, or can actually also work with databases and with some other sources. And then it can consume, transform, do some calculations on that live data, or maybe join against historical data, and then we push the results to whatever stores or services which we need. So here, my use case was that we take villagers, then we calculate the distance between them, and if they are closer than 1024 pixels, I guess. So those numbers I had to play, like kind of how it fits on the map. Then they are close enough, and then I do that comparison on all pairs of the villagers. Here is like the sign less, so the names of the villagers are different, so I want to compare like only once, like not, for example, Louis with Jody and Jody with Louis, but only Louis with Jody. I need only one couple, and I don't want to compare Judy to Judy because like it will be 0, it will be like, it doesn't make any sense. So only like different villagers and the minimum amount of those comparison as I can. And I compare it every second. So this is not the most optimal way, I guess, to do it, but it worked pretty well because then I get the information on the proximity of the villagers, and here actually I put, I don't know if it's really visible, like around the villagers I have those boxes, just for me also to understand when I was debugging this code, if they're close enough to trigger the conversation or not. And then in the Kafka topic, in the information, I was getting like, for example, that Judy and Maro are not close. So actually like there are majority of those are false. But the idea that actually whenever something like this happens, if it's true, I start the conversation. If it falls, I either finish conversation, or if it's not really started by 2 parties, I abort the conversation. So, so this is, and the conversation then goes through large language model. Again, I'm a Kafka person, so I'm using Kafka here to store the conversation messages. So for all the characters, and then when each of them replies, it goes to the same topic, but in the code I only react to the messages sent to that particular villager. So, and then they started talking. They started talking a bit too much. Also here I realized that my prompts are not ideal. Admittedly, because I was running this so often, I used the cheaper version of the model, so maybe like with the latest it would be a bit better. But here I was like, yeah, I really need to work on the prompt because I don't want to have like Marnie to like dots, so I want really like to have an image without any additional information, so like I would say. So I don't really want to have that. I just want to have a clean response. Also, they were sometimes walking and talking, and that was because they were like, the conversation was triggered, but the partner went away, so I added a possibility to abort conversation if it's kind of didn't really started, and also a concept of cooldown. This is where once they talk to someone, then before they start conversation with someone else, there should be a couple of seconds, so it shouldn't be too much talking. Yeah, and I store the conversations also because then I can replace them later if needed. And this is similar to the approach used by June in that paper. They stored it just like JSON files directly in the file system. Here I store it in Kafka if I want to replay the conversation and all the flow of the game. So yeah, so this is that moment, and then I decided to, I had to solve a couple of problems. This is actually why I'm making such a screen, because they were working so much, I couldn't really catch two of them in the same space. So I had to make like a smaller window so that they are starting to talk quicker to each other. So once I added more villagers, there was a problem that they just chaotically talk to each other, like between each other. So if you imagine like 4 villagers, they can actually interact at the same time. And I was like, no, they should actually have only like 1 person to talk to at a given time. If there is no free partners, then I just continue walking. So for example, here, Linus doesn't have available partner and he doesn't talk doesn't really, like, he continues doing his day. So yeah, so they were, because they were talking too much, I had to also play with the amount of time I give between the conversations. And here what I was thinking is that actually if I would have everything happening on the server side, it would be a bit easier. So here I had a combination of part of the logic was on the client side, part of the logic was on the server side. They also were talking quite a lot, which made me a bit frustrated, but at least the message was kind of like meaningful. But again, so I played with the prompts. This is how the prompts, more or less the latest version looks like. So I give the background information. I share the information about who they are, their name, and so on. And also the information of the persons that they are talking to. And then I said the kind of like additional details on how exactly they should interact, keep it short, friendly, in character, and kind of continue the conversation. Do not mention your name, speak as a villager. If the conversation is ongoing, do not greet again. So that kind of worked. I also experimented with kind of conversation end, so that they trigger the conversation end on their own. And I had it either they trigger the conversation end on their own, or they talk for end messages, which was like 15 messages or something like this. Then I wanted to have those meaningful continuous conversations, so I needed some memory. And here I used a large language model for creating a summary of conversation after 2 villagers finished conversation and storing those in a long-term memory as a summary plus the vector representation for that summary, so that later I can quickly search through the old memories and find anything relevant to ongoing conversation. So in each exchange of the messages, in addition to what is going right now, I was given the older relevant memories. And this is how it actually looks like in the OpenSearch dashboard. So this is the summary and the embedding, like this numerical representation for that particular memory in that moment. So with that, I could get like conversation summaries for Jody, for Maru, for example, here for Sam. I wanted to do the same idea which June was doing, to embed a goal for one of the villagers. So here I had the goal, and I took Judy, I think, yeah. So I took Judy, and Judy had now a goal that she wants to organize a conference, kind of the conference, like Stardew Valley Tech Conference. And then I wanted her to convince others to spread that information and maybe take some active stand. And there were a couple of iterations which I had to do, so it kind of worked. So Judy was very happy to convince everyone that they wanted to organize, and also the people to whom she was talking, they were kind of taking the active stance there on activities they could take over and so on. They were quite a bit agreeable and repeatable, so that's something where I had to do some changes in the prompt. But still, like with LLM, they are too eager to please and to kind of agree with everything. So first I took like a couple of villagers so that I can see that this conversation works, and then that they store the memories. And then they come back to that idea. For example, here is the second conversation. Lewis is asking what is like happening with that idea of the conference. So yes, and then I started adding more characters, and then I ran into a problem that actually they talk about conference, but the memories which they store eventually is not really like reflects the name of the conference, so they kind of the summary destroys a lot of details of the event. So I cannot really reuse, and that information cannot be really spread later to other villagers. It kind of gets blended into some vague language. So I had to make some changes to say that if there are like names or is there anything mentioned during that conversation, we want to remember it specifically. And it worked better. So then Maru, for example here, Maru later remembers that at least the name, so innovative site at the Stardew Valley Tech Conference. So that brought me then to bring the whole idea to the whole map and to see how the idea propagates from the villagers who are familiar with that conference and others who are not. And then, for example, Maru here shares the idea with Sebastian. And Sebastian is quite excited for that conference. Later, also we have Pierre, who is also like heard about Jody's plans for that farming conference. I mean, they translated to farming conference, but it's a game about farming, so almost. So I was pretty happy about that. And this is my current state. I'm still improving because I want to have a bit more like reflection on the memories of the villagers and add some more complexity. I totally need to clean my code. The code I will share, JavaScript, and you can run it on your own as well. And this is the Stardew Valley with Kafka, Flink, OpenAI, and vector search. Here is the links, which they contain all the research papers, which I mentioned, as well as the code of the game, it's like of the demo. Yeah, thank you so much for coming to this conference, or to this talk of mine. If you have any questions, I'm happy. I think we have still a bit of time.
We have also competitions. Do you think you regarded these in your game or something like that to put a competition?
Yeah, if you for the recording, I guess.
All right.
All right. In the multi-agent world, it's very common to have competitions. Do you think to put this in your game, something improvement or something like that, to see what happened? For example, if some of your agents create a better party or something like that.
I actually like this idea. I haven't thought about it. Yeah, it's possible. I think like kind of to create, maybe to split them into groups and do. Initially, when I was thinking, I wanted to create another festival so that they have a common theme. The only challenge is that I think that once you add more different goals to those villagers, they're a bit lost. But it's, I think, a challenge for how you prompt or how I will prompt it. But I like the idea of a competition because it's actually true. It's a lot of like those. I need to think what kind of competition based on the text language can be there. Yeah. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Hello. Have you tried using other models besides the OpenAI ones?
No, I didn't. I wanted to try, like, I know that, like, I also used in the past, like, locally run model. OpenAI was, like, very easy choice, and because I had some other demos where I was copying the code, so I used only OpenAI. Oh, no, in the past I tried, actually, other models, and I tried Llama, and the problem I had, like, each model has its kind of quirks, so, like, some models talk too much. So, and when I tried at that point of time, OpenAI was kind of the one who actually could give me more or less meaningful short response. But I'm quite sure that since I tried other models, there was quite an evolution. Yeah.
Because you mentioned that it was very open to pleasing, and I think that's a very OpenAI quirk, which I'm not sure. But yeah.
It totally can be. Yeah, good point. Good point. I need the rude model. Like something which
Yes.
will create a drama there.
Anyone else?
In that case, thank you so much, and I'll see you around.